welcome back, you guys. It was a lot of fun when I had an opportunity to talk with you guys individually, and this idea that I wanted to have both of you on at the same time, and then not just continue talking about your individual journeys, but talk about, and this to me is just fascinating, having been with my wife for 26 years and knowing our journey over that 26-year time period and all the stories that went with it. I wanted to have an opportunity to not only get to know you guys a little bit more, but then hear your guys' story, not just individually, but then also as a couple. And so that's really what, just wanted to learn more about that. So
Well, thanks for having us again.
Yeah. No problem. So, well, why don't we just get started with that? How did you guys meet? I mean, how did that all come about? What?
It's funny because we just talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we did because I got it wrong a little bit. Just my memory was a little off, but it was a long time ago. Yeah.
But I like to think the time that we really truly met was the time that we met out at the bar.
Right.
In I would say unconventional circumstances, and it led to a conversation that exposed me to a different side of her that my assumptions weren't in alignment with, and then I realized that she had something different to offer from an intellectual side, from a pursuit side.
Okay.
But I guess the short story of it from my perspective is I was in town I think when I was in Nebraska. I was coming into town, and my friend had wanted to go out to the bar. So I said, all right, let's go out to the bar. And I went out, and he was telling me that he had met some girls that he was going to meet out with. And I was like, okay, I know one of them. And then I started talking to her, maybe with different intentions, and then I found out that it was much deeper very quickly in the conversation. I ended up not drinking, not engaging any of the bar stuff.
Yeah, it was basically like a busy bar scene. Like, picture a busy bar scene, sure. RBI, like a super busy bar on a Saturday night.
It's a loud bar too.
Yeah. And it was just us sitting out on the patio. Neither of us drinking, everyone drinking around us, and then us talking about like the universe and just deeper ideas. And it was definitely the beginning of us having that insight.
Yeah. It was really interesting to me because I think it was just, timing is a lot of it. Like whatever I was going through in my life, I was exposed to some bigger ideas. I was really getting into a lot of Neil deGrasse Tyson's work and becoming more aware of like what's really out there as far as the vastness of the universe. So I really was engaged with a lot of universe talk. And when I brought it up to a lot of people, crickets. Sure. Nobody's really into that. Nobody's going down that rabbit hole. And then when I started talking to her, the person I least expected to want to talk about that started to talk about that. So I was like, all right.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit. I'm not super familiar with his work. So tell me a little bit.
Well, Neil deGrasse Tyson is an astrophysicist that studies the nature of the universe. He remade the Cosmos series.
Sure. That's where I've heard the name.
Yeah. And so I started getting into a lot of his work and his books about really truly about the vastness of the universe and how
insignificant we are in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
Like the fact that we're all made of the same things as the stars.
One phrase that always sticks in my head is his mentor Carl Sagan said human beings are the first creation of the universe that has the ability to look back on itself. And I thought that was a cool idea, just thinking that we are all part of the universe. We're all part of the elements that make up the universe, and we only exist because of the universe. And being not religious, this was something that I could make sense of it all with.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're in Nebraska. You're wrestling for Nebraska. You're on the wrestling team, right? And so, as a general stereotype, that doesn't seem to be what most Division I state qualifier wrestlers are doing with their spare time, stereotypically. So, how'd you get intrigued with that, Dalton?
Yeah, I think you're right for the most part. Definitely in the Big Ten, people that are in like wrestling country, I guess you'd say. Yeah, I mean, I was just bored with the sport of wrestling. You know, I liked doing the sport. I liked training hard. I liked being combative on a daily basis. But you know, I was just curious about the world. So really, my curiosity led me to reading books that I would have never thought to read. I don't think I got exposed to him from a podcast. I do remember there used to be in the beginning of Netflix, there were a lot of Nova Science Now documentaries, and he was the voice and he was the creator of it.
Okay.
And there was a couple Nova Sciences where they were talking about the like black holes or just the age of suns and how stars are suns that have died, but you're seeing light, that, you know, just stuff like that. And then I was like, whoa, you know. I could tell you a few other experiences that led to my curiosity, but that's probably another conversation.
Okay, sure. Well, probably very similar to how you became fascinated with that. So you guys are at this, you know, so some people may not know where RBI is, you know, that bar, and I know that I probably have only been to that bar a couple times. I'm a couple years older than you guys. After 10 o'clock, and I'm assuming you guys were there after 10 o'clock, you know, whatever night this was. And so, like, for you, Kylie, all of a sudden, this guy, right, is talking about this stuff, but you were intrigued by it. So tell us a little bit about that piece, and how did you get interested in that topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point in my life, I was like craving deeper conversations. And I was at the time living in downtown Chicago. I was pursuing modeling, but I wasn't really pursuing it. I just thought that was like, oh, I want to be a model, but I was not like doing anything to get me there.
Okay.
So that's where our conversation actually started.
Okay.
But for me, I wasn't reading books. I wasn't listening to podcasts. I wasn't doing anything that would have led me to learning about the universe.
Okay.
But I had the deeper sense of like, I know that there's more to life than going out to clubs in Chicago. And I just needed someone to kind of help me wake up.
Sure.
And that conversation, I think, was the beginning of me starting to wake up. But it took time even after that. Like, it was years after that.
Sure. Okay.
That we actually started to hang out on a regular basis.
Okay, so this was like some seeds were planted this night.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like the next day all of a sudden it was 24/7. You guys were always together. So what happens next? Well, and how old are you guys at this time? Like, are you guys both? I don't even know.
I think I'm 22. I think I'm 22.
I was at least 21. I know that.
So maybe 23.
It's good to hear you guys were legally in the bar. That's cool.
Yeah. At that time, yeah.
I never went into bars illegally.
Can't say the same.
I think it was maybe after Nebraska. It was like maybe finishing Nebraska and going to Elmhurst, because I knew I was going to finish my degree. And, you know, I really wasn't focused on having a relationship of any kind. So I was very content with having that moment and letting it see where it went, but not really
pursuing anything.
Yeah. And so I went back to school to Elmhurst, and I just remember every month or so I would send her a message, kind of just catching up with her and seeing how her life was and seeing what she was up to and how she was pursuing her goals and that sort of stuff. And
he would send me like he would say like, hey, check out this podcast if you get a chance, or like, yeah, just how are things going. And I think for the most part I would respond, but I was similar to him. I wasn't interested in pursuing anything. Like, my mind was elsewhere for sure.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And then because you guys are about a year apart, right, age-wise?
2 years.
2 years apart?
Yeah.
Okay. And then when did it kind of go from this acquaintance, getting to know each other, but having kind of moving in a little bit the same direction, but maybe not, maybe Kylie, you weren't as intentional as Dalton was at that point, but you were definitely interested and know you were looking for something, and that's kind of what we talked about in our last interview, was that this idea you were looking for something. And so when did it start moving into an actual relationship? When did you guys start dating, or whatever that next stage was?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was around the time when I graduated from school.
Okay.
And I started coming back home a little bit more often.
Okay.
And we kind of...
He would come over because I had girlfriends I lived with.
Yeah.
So he would come over as a friend and just hang out with us.
Okay.
Like, oh, hey, how's it going? Stop by. And then he would leave. And it was just like, then he would leave and then like my friend and I were like, Dalton is so attractive. Like, we would just have those conversations, then it would be over. It was like nothing.
Okay.
And then, I don't know exactly how or why it started, other than every time I talked to him, and we both remember one specific coffee date that we had at Starbucks, and when I left, I just felt more alive. Like, I felt like excited, not even about him, but about life. And I was like, what is that? I loved that feeling. And the more that we started to hang out, I guess the unique situation, if anyone were to hear my individual conversation with you, I was at this breaking point in my life, but I don't know if you knew that when you first started hanging out with me. Did I show that I was, or was I like I think I had more of a facade of like, I got all my stuff together.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I think I've been pretty cynical about where other people are throughout their lives, but I think I always maybe knew, but I just knew you had strength, so it didn't really matter where you were. I just knew that you could get through the next phase.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. So you guys weren't dating. Well, not obviously, but I guess that would make sense. You talked a little bit last time. We talked a little bit about what happened with The Bachelor, and we didn't get into a real depth of it. But that was what I remember when we talked. It was like the second kind of reality check, or that major letdown, disappointment. The first one was the Disney, and that was a major letdown, and then or disappointment, and then the incident that happened with The Bachelor, and that whole process, and obviously that was probably even more intense, and I would just guess on how having had a little bit of involvement with the entertainment world, and through my daughter with performing arts, and even Caleb with my son with playing football in college, how cold it can be when you are not going to be able to contribute to whatever direction they're going in. Thanks for coming, but could you move out of the way? I mean,
yes.
and that I've watched through their experiences, and I very much remember that through my own experience when I was bodybuilding, being on top of the world one year when I win the national title, and the following year when I'm supposed to, and I get sixth, and the photographers and the newspaper, they were looking beyond me. They were looking at the person on the other side of the room, and I was like, and so you guys weren't dating at that time. You
Right.
come back to Rockford. You're in the midst of this probably shock and brokenness all at the same time. How did you guys connect at that time period? You guys are just friends at that point, but
Yeah.
so how'd that go?
That was
Yeah.
a couple months after, right?
Yeah, I definitely took a few months, I think, to like just process all of it,
Okay.
because I had to wait a couple months for it to even air.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
once it
okay.
started to air, then it like brought it all back up again, and so I was definitely sad, but I was also like, my ego was milking the fact that it aired, so everyone got to see me on national television. I went back bartending, so I was kind of like milking the attention I was getting
Okay.
for a while. And then when I felt the emptiness that brought me, that's when I was like, okay, like this is not enough for me. And I was really just in the midst of a party summer, springtime, and he came over and we had another deep conversation, and then I was reminded of that feeling of what I was actually searching for, which was one, substance, but also like just an inner strength in myself. And I think that's the reason, selfishly, that I was so attracted to him, was because I saw a strength in him I hadn't seen in anyone else. So I was able to almost like see what was possible, to have actual confidence, to have actual self-esteem, and to have self-respect. Like, I was doing things that were so destructive, and he would come around where everyone else was drinking or, smoking cigarettes or doing whatever that was eating junk, and he was just like, oh, I'll hang out with you guys, but I'm not going to do any of that because I don't need to, but I'll hang out with you. So I saw him have self-control that I was like, what? Like, you're going to hang out with us and you're going to have a good time without doing any of these things? And then I felt like, basically, I felt like a loser. I was like, okay, in the best way possible.
Sure.
So I wanted to be better because he was around.
Okay. So that inner conflict between, on one hand, you're seeking something, right, and then you guys have this shared experiences, even if they're just conversations, but you reflected on, okay, this is how I felt afterwards, and so there was this. So that was the beginning. There was another seed that was planted there of the possibility of what could be. And then, but you're still got one foot in how you've been doing things, and then getting a taste of what this other world could be like, right? And you hadn't committed either way yet, but you were pulling out of that other world.
Yes.
Because it wasn't. Well, you used the word. Use the word of empty. That it was. There was an emptiness with it.
Yeah.
So tell us, what were you thinking at that time?
Yeah, what were you thinking?
When all that was happening?
Yeah, that one. It's interesting too, because as much as I don't think that I think for me it's really easy to be black or white, like when it comes to commitment, right? Like, okay, I'm not looking for a relationship, so I'm not in a relationship. I'm not going to be in this phase where we think we are, we think we aren't. Like, I don't want to be there ever.
Right.
And so I think I made a decision at some point where I saw the potential of a relationship. I left this kind of out of the equation, but up until this moment, I was almost positive that I was going to be single forever, and I was going to be okay with it. Mostly because of the cynical nature of, like, if somebody cannot go with me intellectually in like actual pursuits, what you want to accomplish in life, I knew that what I wanted to accomplish in life is not shared with as many people. So I at this point I was just like, maybe there isn't somebody that's willing to do all of these things, go through the things that I'm willing to go through to achieve the things that I want to achieve. I didn't really want to try to ask that of somebody, because I knew that it wasn't only a selfish thing. It was like, that's a difficult thing, so up until this point I wasn't really sure if I was going to have a relationship, but I saw the potential. I saw that she wanted to go places that I wanted to go. live a certain way. So I think it was really at that moment where I said, all right, let's make a commitment. Let's see how this can work out.
Okay.
And I think that's really around the time when I kind of just decided to move back to Rockford, as opposed to staying in the suburbs, where there was a great opportunity in the suburbs, to continue on the path to my goals. And I just felt like life would be much more fulfilling with a counterpart.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick before I ask about that, what do you think? Because we didn't talk about this last time, but what's the driver? You obviously very driven and wanting to accomplish certain things. What if you were able to put that into a kind of like just a nutshell? What do you think is the undercurrent of driving that for you? Because they talk about this idea that we're either chasing after something or we're being chased by something. And for you, what do you think was that? If you peeled it back, where's that coming from? That driving.
I think, I don't know how, or
maybe why is it so?
Yeah, I don't know how to necessarily explain it outside of the self-actualization, fulfilling potential. While I was in college, I tried to make the golf team. I made the golf team. I liked sports were practical applications of skills and work ethic, because if you see somebody doing something and you model their behavior and you work it enough, you can achieve potentially the same outcome, and so I think that's where it came from. Like growing up, hearing my parents say that I could do anything, that nobody was special, nobody was capable of something that I wasn't capable of.
Okay.
And then when I started to experience life outside of the small town of Belvedere and seeing what was really possible, I was completely understanding of that. I saw people that, had millions and billions of dollars, and I saw people that were professional athletes. I've seen people have successful companies that started from the ground up, and then that's when I realized, like, whatever it is that I want to do, I can do it. And so, that there's a quote from Oprah. It's like, as long as you know what you don't want to do, that will keep you in alignment to finding out what you do want to do. Mm-hmm. And so it's really easy for me to just stay avoiding the things I don't want to do and just going after the things that excite me at the time. So I don't know anything other than the fact that I have a confidence in my ability to reach my potential.
Gotcha. And remind me of a couple things, and I talk about this within the clients that I'm counseling or people that I'm coaching, and it's also reflective of my own story. I think there is this tension between what may drive us is that tension between how I've been wounded and the story that I tell myself from that wound, and what are my gifts and the story I tell myself about those gifts. And there's a tension between those two. I'll give you an example. I clearly in my mind remember before 7th grade, I didn't know that I was invisible, but I experienced being invisible. At school, right, in grade school and early middle school, I thought I had friends at school because I knew their names and they knew my names, but I didn't hang out with anybody after school. But I didn't know you were supposed to. So it wasn't like I was longing for something. I wasn't missing something. I had never experienced it. So then I didn't know, right? But I clearly remember what happened when I became visible. It was the same school. It was a 6th, 7th, and 8th grade school. It was at Harlem, and it was the middle school there. And that summer, I had started working out. Before my 7th grade football season, started working out. Didn't know that I also had a growth spurt. And And on the 7th and 8th grade football team, I went from thinking I was going to be a lineman because my perception of myself was this husky, stocky, overweight or a little bit overweight kid, and I didn't realize that in the mirror and what other people saw was this person who was a middle schooler but had muscle, because I'd been working out all summer and running all summer, and I didn't see it change. But I literally remember lining up. He had I went with the lineman because that's how I saw myself, and we had to run 100 yards because we were doing sprints, and he told us to run as fast as you can, and so I did, and I finished first out of all the 7th and 8th graders, and we ran back, and I did again. He goes, "What's your name?" And I told him my name. So you're playing running back now, and I didn't even understand that, right? And what the beginning of that was meaning, but when you're in middle school, you become popular with the boys because you're athletic, and then you start drawing girls' attention because the boys are paying attention, and I had no idea what was happening at all. I was still a shy kid that I was the year before, 3 months earlier, in the same hallways. But now with all this attention, I knew that I didn't want it to go away, but I had no idea how to handle it. And I also associated completely with working out and with sports. It wasn't till later, and I've had that story happen a couple times, where things like that, I had no idea. Then all of a sudden I became visible on a whole other level. But the wound part, not only did I not know how to talk about it and ask people about it, but the wound part also that came with that was I remember experiencing what it was like to be invisible, and I know I didn't want to go back. And so when I say about things that drive me, I know that that's been a part of what's driven me in the past, and probably to a degree still does, of not wanting to be invisible or to be forgotten or insignificant. Now, on the other hand, my gifts of how do I relate to people, how can I communicate with people, what can I bring to the community or bring to people, I'm aware of those too, and that drives me almost from a responsibility, let alone I get a high from it because I'm in that space that you're referring to. I meet with certain people, like you were talking about, Kylie, and when I walk away, it just feels like it flows. Mm-hmm. And I want more of those conversations versus when it doesn't flow, like it's harder conversation or choppy or surface or whatever it may be. And sometimes that's me, sometimes that's the environment, sometimes that's them, right? But and so that tension between gifts and wounds. Any thoughts about? That's what I was.
Yeah.
More. Does that any thoughts about either one of you?
Yeah.